Thank you for joining us today. We're outside here, just outside of our office by Boardman Lake. We couldn't resist the wonderful fall colors that we've got going on. So hope you're enjoying your fall as we come to you to talk a little bit about tax planning in retirement. Now, a lot of the tax planning that we do and that we talk about is really based on active income. So whether it's from a business or you have earned income that you've got from maybe a job or from a consulting process. But there's a lot of tax planning that we want to do in retirement, but doesn't seem like it's always there. We talk about, Roth conversions. You've heard me talk a lot about those, or a few others. But there are other strategies that we wanted to bring to you for you to consider both before retirement and in retirement, specifically for when you don't have earned income. So the two key takeaways that I want you to hear from this video is consistent income and the shift of ownership, not control. So the first one, let's talk about that. Consistent taxable income. So you've been working hard all your life, and the age-old tax planning strategy is to use traditional retirement contributions throughout the year. So you're putting into your 401k and your 403b or even your IRA. And the reason you're doing that while you're working is because in theory you're in a higher taxable bracket while you're working than when you're in retirement. I can't tell you the number of times that I'll have clients that will come to me after the fact, just before retirement or early in their retirement, and they will have pulled a large amount of money out of the 401k to maybe pay off your house mortgage because you're thinking, well, you know what, I don't want to have a mortgage payment in retirement, so I'm going to pull from my traditional IRA and pay off my mortgage. Or maybe I want to buy a second home, or that boat that you've been dreaming about all these years while you've been working that you want to now go sailing on your boat, or a big, large vacation. Whatever the particular topic is, the strategy all along was that you were in a higher tax bracket working, but then than in retirement. But if we pull all of a sudden, all at once from your traditional IRA or your retirement account, there's a chance that you can go up into a higher tax bracket. And that's the last thing that we want to do, especially in retirement, because there's so few little windows that we have that we can really use in retirement without that active income, that if you pull all at once, that you end up pushing yourself into a higher tax bracket than what we want to. So the strategy is to plan for that, is to know that says, okay, well, you know what, coming into retirement or early in retirement, if you want to pay down your house or you want to buy that second home, that we want to spread that over a couple different years so that we're pulling a lower amount over 2 or 3 years versus a higher amount all in 1 year. Further kind of talking through this consistency is we really want to utilize the deferred income that you may have. So maybe it's a deferred pension plan, or it's an annuity contract that you don't have to pull right away. We want to strategize when you stack these different sources of different buckets that you have of your retirement and when you pull it. You don't want to have them all start at the same time. So the worst thing you can do is have your deferred pension plan, your annuity, and investment retirement pull all happen in the same year, because that's again going to push you into a higher tax bracket. Now, having just talked about the fact that we don't want to have too much in 1 year, the flip side of that is that we don't want to wait too long either. So oftentimes there's this gap, maybe after you've retired but before you've taken Social Security, that we have that here's a lower bracket. We don't want to let that lower bracket where we don't have any income, that we lose that. We want to make sure that we even out. So we want to maybe take some a little bit earlier or some a little bit later. So we want to use these different buckets and strategize on a multi-tax year plan is so critical in retirement, especially as we start thinking about Social Security, because Social Security in and of itself is not taxable. But if you start taking too much too quickly, then you're going to find that having that Social Security also becomes taxable and then gets double taxed, and we definitely want to avoid that. And then lastly, when we talk about income in just too much in one particular year, what we typically focus on is income taxes. But what we can't forget about now is Medicare premiums, because that's also now a factor for you, that your Medicare premiums are based on your income. So if you pull too quickly, too fast, all of a sudden that next year, your premiums may go from the $148 to as high as $504. That's off of 2021 years. So making sure that you really stay consistent within your given year and the income that you have is so critical as part of tax planning in retirement. Now, the second topic that I want to talk about today is how do you transfer ownership, or the concept of transferring ownership without transferring control. Now, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the tax planning that happens is through charitable organizations, through donations. And in fact, we're going to have a fair amount of videos coming up here on some of those particular strategies, whether it's land conservation easements, whether it's donating to a donor advised fund and others. But ultimately you're not ending up with the cash. That's the whole theory of why you get a deduction, is because you don't get it. But there are ways that you can give up ownership without control that you still retain some of the benefits. A good example of this would be what's called a life lease, where you may transfer the ownership of a property, whether maybe it's a cottage or a family farm, or maybe even your primary residence, where you transfer ownership of that, but then you retain control for the remainder of your life. Now, there's some calculations that go into that, but by doing that, you've transferred the ownership within that, but then you still retain control. Now, at first blush, that may seem a little bit weird. Well, wait a second, I'm transferring ownership. How is that saving taxes? When we start talking about the second strategy here, we have to look at a bigger picture. Not just your taxes, but also the intergenerational taxes. So whether it's yours, maybe your kids, they're grown kids that are in a higher tax bracket, or even your grandkids that are there. And so when you look at it, the whole macro picture, they may be able to get a tax deduction and they may be able to pay less taxes, and on a combined basis, you're better off. Or maybe it goes to your grandkids and they're in a lower tax bracket, maybe even 0%, that we can strategize here. So we're doing two factors, two purposes. One is you're transferring your estate anyway, but then we're also doing tax planning within that. For both of these, whether it's the consistent income or it's the shifting ownership but not control, it takes planning. Nothing good happens quickly, especially in retirement, as it relates to taxes. There are so many tools that we have, or many tools that we have, that are at our disposal that we have to plan for. In retirement, we're already handicapped and don't have all of the tools at our disposal. But if we plan for them, we could really utilize those. So in retirement, it's so important to be thinking, to do a multi-year plan, not just one, but multi-year, where we really look ahead and we strategize what are the different things that we're going to be doing. Thank you for joining us. I know I talk a lot about tax planning, but that's so crucial for you during these years, especially in retirement, where we have the limited items that we can do and the strategies that we can do. We're looking forward to being able to talk with you, to strategize on ways that we can minimize taxes and retain the wealth that you've worked extremely hard for all of your life. Thanks for joining, and look forward to talking to you.